Hi everyone. I suppose the last three speakers went through some very valid content and some very interesting content. A lot of what I'm probably going to cover as well, but maybe I'm going to try and give you a different perspective on it. In terms of, I suppose, I had to laugh at the streaks and things like that. I have two children at home, two teenagers, and my daughter only started secondary school this year, and it's the first thing I ever heard, these streaks, and I see her in the morning now and she's maintaining these streaks, and it was completely alien to me. I suppose I grew up in a period where there was no internet, and eventually internet came along, and email is what I use primarily on a day-to-day basis. So I was kind of interested, how many people here use email on a daily basis? Okay. And of you that use email, how many of you have got spam email from somebody from some kingdom, someplace offering you 20 million? 1, 2. How many of you have responded? 1, 2. Okay, well that disappoints me, because I suppose they're very crude attempts at these phishing emails, and I thought, like, in the past they were very crude. The cyber criminals have become a lot more advanced now in how they're trying to extract information from you. So really what I want to try to do today is, I suppose, bring you through some of the actual the risks that are out there. I want to bring you through part of our environment, because we run a very large network here. We run a large data center, so we see a lot of these threats coming through, and we see them, and we have to put in tools and policies and things like that to try and protect our users, our students, and our users. Okay. So in terms of, just very briefly, in terms of, I suppose, our environment, we have over 20,000 students here on campus, so that's about nearly 14,000 undergraduate students, and hopefully we'll see some of you here in the years to come. About 4,000 postgraduate students, and then we'd have students, PhD students, and adult ed. We'd see most of our students come from the Munster region, but we do see a lot of students from abroad. We'd see students from over 100 countries. We'd have nearly 3,000 staff working here, so we're one of the largest employers here in the Munster area, and those numbers can swell then during busy periods where we bring on a lot of occasional staff. So we're a large employer. We'd have a huge network that has to support all these users. We bring in about 275 million of income, and that comes from the government, it comes from student grants, and it comes from industry. In fact, UCC itself is probably one of the most successful institutions in the country in terms of generating research income, so it's great to have that sort of an institution here in Cork, and we'd be ranked in the top 2% of all institutions across the globe, and I suppose we'd have a huge alumni. In terms of, I suppose, what I do here in UCC is I lead a group of IT professionals who look after our data center and who look after our network and our Wi-Fi and what you're using today. We have 2 data centers across campus, and we would store probably over 1.5 petabytes of data. That's 1,500 terabytes of data, and that's growing constantly because we're generating data at an enormous rate. As I said, a massive Wi-Fi network, so we could see 16,000 users on our Wi-Fi network on a daily basis. So in terms of underpinning that, security is critical for everything that we do. We have multiple tools and multiple, I suppose, ways of protecting ourselves. So in terms of all our desktops, all our endpoints, we put in the best of antivirus on those, because we need to stop a lot of the malware and a lot of the spamming that comes through to us. In terms of our email, we use email gateways, which will help prevent all this email coming through and block it at source. We'd have a lot of policies, and we do a lot of security awareness training similar to this with our students and staff. And unfortunately, it still happens. It still gets through. There's a lot of threats out there, and we can't stop them all. So we're starting to come to realize, for us, the most important thing is actually protecting our data, because it's becoming more and more difficult for us to protect the endpoints. We need to protect what the data, which is essentially our crown jewels. We're a university. We generate information. We actually manage an awful lot of information. So it can be health information, it can be research information, it can be student information, and we have an obligation to make sure that data is protected. We have a legal obligation, because under the Data Protection Act, for us, we have an obligation. So if there's a security breach, we have to report that to the data commissioner. And in fact, those laws and those regulations are only going to get stricter, because next year, whether you know it or not, there's a new regulation out there. It's called EU General Data Protection Regulation, and that puts more onus on people who are storing data. So whether it's a university or whether it's an organization like Facebook or whatever, it puts massive onus on them to protect that data. And if there is a data breach, they then become liable. There's huge financial penalties for these companies if data is breached. So that can be 4% of turnover or 20 million, or whatever is the higher of each. So suddenly, there's a lot more onus on us to actually protect that data. And then for you, I suppose the person whose data is being used, you have more rights then as well. You have rights to actually get access to that data. You have rights for it to be forgotten, for all that data to be deleted, and you have rights then for that information to be transferred across service providers. So this is a welcome addition, I suppose, in terms of, for you, the person whose data is being restored, I think it's a good progress. Digital security, it's big business. So look, this is just an infographic of, I suppose, all the different security firms out there, service providers, software that's out there. So it's massive business. There's a lot of hype around security. Don't be fooled here. There's an awful lot of hype, but it is important. Over the next few years, you will see a lot of this collapsing and, I suppose, trends emerging. I suppose the big trend that's emerging here in terms of security is artificial intelligence, in terms of like the security and the signatures that are being attacked by these cyber criminals. It's getting more difficult. So really what the security firms now are trying to, I suppose, profile what you're doing, profile traffic, so that they can easily identify threats that are coming through in a more dynamic way, because very much it's static now. They know that there's this threat out there and they develop something to protect it. But the cyber criminals are so advanced now that they can quickly just evolve the different malware, and it becomes more difficult. So now it's artificial intelligence and analytics, so they can see straight away you're logging on from a separate geolocation. Is that normal? It probably isn't, so we're going to block it. Or is it you're logging in from a different device? Let's block it. So the security firms are starting to use artificial intelligence and algorithms to try to become a little bit more dynamic. So I suppose in terms of, look, hacking is nothing new, and just bear with me, I'm just probably going to bring you through a couple of, I suppose, over history, how hacking has actually evolved. If you go back, this is a screenshot from The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch. Many of you may have seen it, but basically they used hacking during World War II to hack into what the Germans were using for when they were passing messages out to their troops along the fronts. They were able to hack that, decode the messages, and they shortened the actual war. They claimed they shortened the war by about 2 years. So that's Benedict Cumberbatch playing a guy called Alan Turing, who's credited with actually for breaking that code. If you go into the 60s, a lot of the hackers had these freaking boxes. So you won't remember public phones. So there was public phones and these sort of phones that I show here. But they had a small device that they could connect onto the phones that would allow them to make free long-distance calls. But all of this was they wasn't harmful. Okay, they were making free calls, and I suppose the likes of the telecoms companies weren't too happy with it. But you know what? It was relatively innocent. It was only until, I suppose, the late 70s, the 80s, and up to present time that a more sinister aspect happened. Here we have a picture of a guy called Kevin Mitnick, who was probably the first guy who was imprisoned for cyber crimes, basically. He broke into a company called DEC Equipment Corporation, which was a large computer manufacturer. And he managed to, over a telephone wire and a telephone, he managed to break into the system that they called ARC, which was a system that they used to, I suppose, store their operating systems and their software. So he managed to break into that, and he was caught, and he spent 12 months in prison. But again, he was just attacking corporates. During the 80s, I suppose it really took off. So most of you won't have seen this film, War Games. I was a teenager when this was out, but it kind of brought hacking to the fore and into people's mind. So you have Matthew Broderick here playing a teenager who hacked into a US system, and he thought it was a simulation game, but he essentially nearly started a nuclear war, World War III, and it goes through that. But really what it shows here, at the start of the 80s, really what happened was computers became a kind of commodity. People had them in their homes now. So this is an Amstrad 64. That was my first computer there, which I used primarily for games. But that was what people could have now. They could actually get access to technology which previously would only be available in universities or in industry, and suddenly it became more available. At the time, it was more fun. Hacking was more fun for people, just kind of, can I break into something? And there wasn't huge threats there. It was only really into the 90s then that it started. So there was a couple of examples, if you bear with me. There's a couple of examples. One was a guy called Kevin Holson, I think his name was. But basically, there was a competition by Kiss FM in Los Angeles for a Porsche 944, and the 102nd caller would win that. So he managed to basically block the whole Los Angeles telephone system through hacking. He managed to block it to ensure that he became the 102nd caller, and he won that car. You also have the example of another Russian guy, Vladimir Levin, who managed to break into Citibank, but he was caught, but he was transferring over $10 million from Citibank. And then a picture here is basically a picture of the first virus, or the first worm that brought down large portions of the internet. And a guy called Robert Morris, he faced a jail term because of that, because he was the first guy, I suppose, imprisoned under new cyber laws that were brought out during the 90s. But then, since then, it has just really taken off, and it's taken a much more sinister aspect to it, because there's criminals out there now, and it's for financial gain that they're looking at here now. They're looking to basically steal information, steal financial information, and try to monetize it. So you have examples here of, for example, Yahoo, back in 2012, 1 billion accounts compromised. The following year, Yahoo again attacked, 500 million accounts compromised. You have LinkedIn were compromised. We even had the example here in Ireland of SuperValu. Many of you would have seen that on the news, where SuperValu partnered with a loyalty firm, and they were storing credit card details locally on a database. They were compromised, and that means 65,000 people's credit card details were available on the internet. So really, it's become more sinister, and it's very difficult to block these guys. Many of you would have seen Stuxnet then. There's a virus out there called Stuxnet, and this has been used. Allegedly, this was a virus that was developed between the Americans and the Israelis to basically attack Iranian nuclear plants. So the Iranians were building up their nuclear program, so they had a fully air-gapped I suppose, factory as such, that the network didn't extend out beyond it. But what the Americans and the Israelis did was they actually had USB keys that they laid around in the car park with this virus on it. Somebody picked up this shiny USB key, popped it into a computer in the factory, and suddenly the virus was free, and it targeted specific computers or specific hardware that were related to the nuclear industry. And gradually it kind of slowed down the whole nuclear plant, and the Iranians didn't know what was going on. It only emerged years later. This is what happened. So it is evolving over time. And then more recently, I suppose, what we see an awful lot of, and some of you may be the victim of this, is ransomware. Over the last 12, 18 months, we have seen multiple ransomware attacks. We've seen many of our staff actually have been victims of this. And fortunately for us, we have very good backups, and we've restored from backups. So one thing that you should bear in mind here is that if you have important information or if you have folders that you want to keep, make sure you keep backups of them, okay? So basically, for those who don't know, ransomware is a type of malware that you visit a site or you open an email and you open an attachment. What that fires off is a piece of code that basically encrypts everything on your device, and then suddenly you get a pop-up to saying your information is encrypted. If you want to get access to this, then please pay a certain amount of bitcoins. And you pay the bitcoins, and they may or may not release that. Your other alternative, then, as I said, is backups. Most of these threats come through email, and that's where we see most of them coming through. And that's just a graph from Trend Micro in terms of the growth of ransomware. So it has certainly become massive over the last 18 months, to the point that I suppose we here in UCC, and certainly in IT services, I suppose IT security has become probably our number one risk, and ransomware is a massive threat to us, especially if they get access to, as I said, our crown jewels, our core data. So I suppose cybercriminals aren't just interested in corporate data. They're not they're also interested in your data. Your data actually has value as well, and they want to steal your information, whether it's your banking information or whether it's personal information for identity theft. So they are interested. So they are interested in it. They're not just after big organizations. And The reality is your data has a value on the black market. So you hear people talking about the dark net. So the dark net obviously is an underground internet, and like you use whatever browser you're using Safari or using your Internet Explorer. They have other browsers that they use to store the actual, to use the dark net, which is anonymized. And it is possible to buy identities quite easily online. So from Trend Micro, I have some information here from Trend Micro in terms of, as of September, what value they place on your information. So if you take a credit card, if somebody has a credit card, depending on the balance or what available balance is on that credit card, it'll cost $1 to $7. If you have Uber credentials, you're talking about $4 per identity. Facebook, 56 cents. Dropbox, $1. Netflix account, $1.13. So all of these identities can be purchased on the darknet, and people can buy in batches of them, as well as buying identities. What a lot of these criminals are, that you can buy malware as well. So somebody can log on to the darknet and buy a certain amount of malware if you wanted to do an attack on a particular organization, or if you want to run a phishing campaign, for example, through email to try and gather information. All this can be bought on the darknet by criminals who may not actually be very technical, but they can buy this stuff. These are platforms that they're buying on the darknet. So in terms of the cyber threats, what we see, I suppose, look, there's social engineering, and where they try and engineer your identity. You've got various types of malware, whether it's spyware, whether it's hacking, phishing, vishing, Trojans. You have email security. Be very careful with email, because email on its own is not a particularly secure mechanism of transferring information. The data is unencrypted in general, and it's very easy to read. You have mobility risks as well, making sure that your devices are locked, making sure that you have a PIN on those, making sure that if you have a laptop that it's encrypted, because if you lose it, that nobody can get access to that data. So in terms of phishing, look, I'm sure most of you are aware of what exactly phishing is, but for those of you who may not be, it's a very non-technical way of trying to extract information from you. So generally it happens over email. You get out of the blue, you get an email that you're not really expecting it. That email can have maybe a link to it, or it can have an attachment to it, and you can click on that link and it'll bring you somewhere where you're asked to enter credentials or whatever, and that's how they extract that information from you. You hear also about spear phishing, which is a more targeted phishing attack. So phishing attack, basically, they just send thousands of email out there hoping that one or two might respond. Phishing emails are probably more targeted because they might identify, and we've seen these in UCC, where they do a certain level of social engineering behind the scenes. They know who the chief financial officer in an organization is, for example. They know who the legal officer is, and they know who the signatories on a check might be. So what they do is they would actually send an email directly to that person, pretending, because they can easily change who the from address is from. It's very simple to do. So you receive an email, you think it's from, for example, the CFO, and in that email they're saying, you know what, I want you to transfer a certain amount of money to this account. And the unwitting person at the other end says, oh, well, it's from Joe Bloggs, who's the CFO, well, it must be true, and they try and transfer that money. That's exactly what happened with Meath County Council there recently, where they tried to transfer, I think it was €4 million. It's through these basically spear phishing attacks. So really not very technical and very simple, but if people aren't, I suppose, aware and vigilant, they can fall prey quite easily. So in terms of phishing, I suppose, you should always be very suspicious of emails that ask for personal or company information. We will never ask our students or our staff for their credentials. Your bank will never ask you for those details. So never give out that information over email. So be suspicious. Never send your password or personal information in response to any email. And be very careful of links within emails as well. A link might seem valid, but if you hover over that link, you'll see a different destination. The hyperlink might look slightly different. Okay, so just be very careful. Just don't click on it, just look at what is there. And be very suspicious of any attachments as well. And if you do get a spam email like that, or a phishing email, don't send it on to everybody else, just delete it. Okay. And here I have an example, because as I said, we do get a lot of these phishing emails here. So this is an example from a couple of years ago, where a lot of our staff here in UCC would have got a phishing email asking them to click on a link that looked like our UCC email website, basically. People would have clicked on it. but it actually brought them to a site that was hosted by a French internet service provider that was a complete replica, exact replica of what we would have, what our site looked like. So if to anybody looking at it would say, well, yeah, that's UCC's website, they would have logged on to that. Behind the scenes, they would have actually harvested the details and sent you straight on to actually the UCC website, and you would have been completely unknown. It would be completely unknown to you that actually they've harvested your accounts and completely invisible. I got onto the site there where this was being hosted, and I could see not only where the UCC's website's being hosted there, but there was banking and telecoms companies in there as well. So it's so easy for these guys, and they're very clever in how they do this. Vishing then, I suppose, it's similar to phishing, but generally it's over the phone. Basically, someone phones your house to say, you know what, that your account is being compromised or your bank details or whatever, and they'll encourage you either to give information over the phone or they'll encourage you to phone back on a number. And unfortunately for the poor, I suppose, people that are getting the call, they phone back and the criminals on the other side because they haven't hung up or they've given you a number that is their actual number. So be very careful. Don't ring back straight away. Check out the numbers online first of all and try and phone through a credible route. Use a different phone potentially. Okay. I won't go into social engineering. I think you probably all know this movie here, The Identity Thief with Melissa McCarthy. You all know, I think, how easy it is for criminals to extract information and build up a profile of you and build up your identity, particularly, as the previous speakers have said, if you put your date of birth, your address, if you make your accounts public, it's very easy for them to build up a profile of you. And what I might just show you is a quick YouTube video. It won't take too long, but basically this is a guy.
Insecten.
Dat lief?
Ik voel twee insecten op uw rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenië?
Sorry.
Een moto. Oranje. Pas erop. Zenit.
Oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de...
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4...
De vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is mijn spierscheur? Maison rouge, balcon, blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
97. Last month, you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8,
Ja.
5, voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €750.000.
Ja, eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh man. Ah, dat is heel eng.
So just be very careful, I suppose, what information you do put up online, because it's very easy for cyber criminals to extract that data and build profiles of you. In terms of malware itself, look, I suppose malware is just malicious software, and it's just generally used to describe the likes of viruses, worms, trojans. But the real objective, as I said previously, is to steal your information, obtain personal information, credentials, banking details, is to maybe inject ransomware onto your machine or inject viruses or keyloggers, for example, where they can actually log what you're doing on the internet, log your usernames and passwords, or even worse, or to use as botnets, for example. So botnets would be essentially just dumb devices that are used on a broader scale for denial of services attacks. So, for example, if somebody decides they don't like UCC, on the darknet they can go out and buy a denial of service attack on UCC and all these botnets. So if you have a device that's suppose compromised, it can act as a botnet to basically start firing traffic at UCC and just bring all the service to a standstill. So then the UCC website just becomes unavailable. So just be very, very, very careful. And a lot of these arrive as email attachments or from visiting websites. And I suppose pop-ups are another way of actually malware infecting your machine. Okay, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So no one gives away free iPads. I don't know, does anybody respond to any of this, and did they actually get a free iPad? Unlikely. And as I said, I suppose emails as well. Be very careful with emails. Emails in general, by their nature, are insecure. It's a great way of actually sending emails and sending information, but it is insecure. So don't ever send credit card information, credentials, or sensitive information over email, because it is by its nature insecure. In terms of passwords, and like a number of the speakers have already spoken about passwords, so certainly do not share your passwords. Never write down your passwords. Always use a complex password, I suppose, alphanumeric characters, and if possible, don't use dictionary words. Try and use passphrases, maybe where there's the first line of your favorite poem or whatever, with letters replaced for numbers, and put in some special characters in there. But certainly don't use dictionaries, because there are tools out there, because computers are so powerful these days. If you're using a normal dictionary word, they'll have it within seconds. You should change your password frequently. Practice safe passwords on all your devices. If you can use two-factor authentication, and if it's available for certain applications, try and use it. So two-factor authentication is when you have you have two methods of accessing the service. You use your password, but then a token is also sent to your phone, for example, or another email address, and you get that token that's generated each time, and you can use that then to access the service. It's cumbersome, but it's very safe. And then if you have multiple, you should have multiple passwords for all your different services, and don't write them down. As I said, there are tools out there. For example, you can use KeePass files where you can keep, and it's all encrypted, and you can keep your passwords in that one file. I know it's difficult to keep multiple passwords, and you know what, I don't necessarily always do it, but I try to. And just bear with me, just one last video there in terms of passwords.
We've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity lately, largely because of what happened to Sony. Companies and individuals are more concerned about the safety and privacy of their information than ever. President Obama has unveiled a number of new proposals this week to crack down on hackers, and he plans to address this in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday. And it's great that the government is working on this, but the truth of the matter is we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123. And as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on the Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon,
And what's its name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where did you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. So you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday,
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468, and then Israel. It's only 3, but it's. Yeah.
I think you get the idea anyway, so be very careful of your passwords and who you give them out to. So I suppose if I was to summarize, I suppose the first thing is follow good password practices. If you have important information, back up the information and have multiple backups. patch your machines or your devices. We patch our devices regularly, so we follow Microsoft patches and we push them out regularly. Ensure you have antivirus running on your desktops. Beware of phishing and online scams. Protect your identity, and then secure your devices. So make sure your devices are encrypted if that's possible. Okay. And again, just showing my age here now. So Hill Street Blues. None of you will remember this, but just be careful out there, I guess. Okay. Thank you.